So I told you I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who he's an attorney, by the way, and knows Harriet Miers, and says, you need to be on the radio supporting this woman. I said, why? He said, because she's a great person. It started rattling off all this stuff from her resume. He's a lawyer. He'd seen her ABA conventions. He knew her. She's a wonderful I'm sure she's wonderful. Nobody is doubting her resume. That's not the question. The question is, what's she going to do when she gets on the Supreme Court? Now, last week, John Funn from the Wall Street Journal had a piece that was a tacit endorsement, I guess you would call it. Now he's changed his mind a little bit after talking with multiple colleagues of Harriet Miers. He's come to a different conclusion. He's on the line with us. John, how are you?
Pleasure.
Appreciate it very much you being with us. John, of course, was kind enough to write a praise quote for my last book as well. I appreciate that very much.
It was a good book and a great story.
Thank you very much. Now, Harriet Miers, we don't know anything about her. It's obvious that the president is putting her up because we don't know anything about her, because she's not going to be shot down from that angle. Is this where we're going now with Supreme Court nominees, that we're going to get somebody that nobody knows anything about?
I mean, it's almost to the point where we're now going to drag people out of the witness protection program and nominate them from the Supreme Court.
It's ridiculous. So what made you change your mind?
Well, I spoke with a dozen friends, colleagues, and political players in Texas who know Harriet Miers. Almost all of them have great words of praise for her, especially the fact that, she's a genuinely good person, doesn't gossip or have a harsh word to say about anybody. But all of them express puzzlement and bewilderment at the extent to which she has literally failed to communicate her own views over the years. She always represents her clients, or she always chooses to say nothing. One of her former law partners told me she is unrevealing to the point of a personal obsession. She keeps her cards so close to her chest they could be plastered on it.
So we don't know where she stands, and that's on purpose, is what you're saying.
It is on purpose. I mean, no one is this close-mouthed unless they want people to think whatever they want to think of someone. I mean, how many times, Phil, have you met somebody who sort of, nods at you, makes murmuring noises, and you think, well, this is a great person, they agree with me. Well, they actually never have agreed with you.
Right.
They just want you to think that they agree with you.
And they never say they agree with you. They just nod politely, which is apparently what she's been doing to everybody. I mean, she gave money to Al Gore's campaign, which is semi-understandable in 1988 when people really didn't know that he had gone completely over to the liberal side.
She was a Democrat until 1989, and so was Phil Gramm until 1984, and so was Governor Rick Perry of Texas. That's not a disqualifier. However, she was in the Dallas City Council for 2 years. That was the one period in her public career where she had to take some stands. And what we learned from that period of time is, she started out conservative, but she kept changing her position. She was against a tax increase, and then she voted for a tax increase, and it was a tax increase to fund libraries and arts funding, not exactly a top priority in a city that has a budget deficit. She started out opposing expansion of an airport. Then she retreated. She started out opposing a redistricting plan for the city council backed by liberals that had support of two-thirds of the city's voters, and then she backed off and backed the liberals. In other words, I don't see the steel or the resolve in Harriet Miers that convinces me that over the course of time she won't be able to avoid being tugged to the left. Because you have to remember, we have some history here, Phil. We've had 7 Republican presidents in the last 50 years. All of them have appointed people to the Supreme Court who ended up moving left.
Right.
All of them.
And because they didn't know enough about them.
Or they didn't pick carefully enough.
Right. And this is certainly not a careful pick, is it?
Pardon?
This is certainly not a careful pick, other than it being a politically careful pick.
Well, George W. Bush would say it is a careful pick because I know Harriet Miers intimately. She's worked with me for a decade. I know where she stands. And even though you don't, trust me. So from his point of view, it's a careful pick. I don't think politically it is a careful pick because what you've got right now is the president's base on the right fractured. You've got the liberals sitting on the sidelines enjoying themselves. You've got a lot of people, regardless of their political ideology, suggesting that this is a crony appointment. And, of course other presidents have appointed cronies, but is that what we want?
Well, we've got the president now who's saying, trust me. And he says, trust me on all sorts of things. And I think that the base, the Republican conservative base, they've been biting their tongue when it comes to the illegal alien problem and the amnesty program, saying, well, but he's done this with tax cuts. They've bitten their tongue when it comes to Norman Mineta being head of the transportation department. And I think this may be one doubt too far. What do you think?
Well, remember what Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify.
Right.
Now, we have the example of Earl Warren and William Brannan in Eisenhower's administration, Harry Blackmun in Nixon's administration, John Paul Stevens in Ford, Sandra Day O'Connor and Anthony Kennedy during Reagan, David Souter under Bush. I'd like to have faith in this president, but this is a faith-based initiative that, I just don't see the divine evidence that we have to take this on blind faith. I'm not saying the president should withdraw the nomination, although there are a lot of people in Washington saying that. I'm not saying the Senate should reject her, because I think she needs to have confirmation hearings. What I am saying is I think questions about her and demands that, frankly, she makes some kind of statements about her general views before the hearings are absolutely appropriate. This is an unusual nominee. This is the ultimate mystery date.
Indeed it is, but then they're going to say they're going to ask her specific questions about Roe v. Wade, and they show I can't answer that. How would this be for a fair question? Ms. Miers, will you follow the Constitution and only the Constitution in your rulings? Would that not be a fair question to ask? Because that's really ultimately all we want to know, isn't it?
It's what the Founding Fathers intended.
Right.
Another fair
not look at world court rulings, not look at the French, not look at any other thing other than what the Constitution says.
Another fair question would be, Ms. Miers, what texts, what guidelines, what thought processes would you bring to judging such and such a case? What do you think is important? What do you put store in?
Right.
And look, I know that she's going to come with all kinds of great talking points. She's got a great success story in her legal career. And I know that she's going to try to evade the senator's questions. But I'm just saying this is why we have confirmation hearings, because this is the Supreme Court of the United States. It's an appointment for life. And frankly, she is the swing vote.
So what's your feeling there, John? I mean, ultimately, is she going to get confirmed? Is she going to be on the Supreme Court?
I would have to say the odds are in her favor, but I am telling you, her failure and the failure of her surrogates and the failure of the White House to properly explain her or put out a plausible story as to why she has no paper trail, no track record on any constitutional issues is disturbing. I mean, they've had a week, and frankly, we've been given pretty thin oatmeal. Yeah. And I have to tell you, Phil, it's bizarre because it's almost as if she still doesn't want to tell anyone who she really is. I'm sorry. That's fine if you're a law partner. It's fine if you're behind-the-scenes counsel to the president. But if you're on the Supreme Court of the United States, I'm sorry.
We have to know. Exactly. All right, John, appreciate it very much. John Funn from the Wall Street Journal. Always a pleasure to talk with you.
And my piece can be found, if your listeners want it, at opinionjournal.com.
We were plugging that a little while ago. That's a great piece today, too. Opinionjournal.com is where you'll find that. John, thanks very much.
Thank you.